Welcome to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Tracy Shirk, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
We are chatting this week about how we identify the right candidate for the role. So with that, I just again want to welcome you. And my name is Tracy Shirk, and I'm the Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. So how many of you, let's say you're job searching, because that never happens, right? And what we heard last week is that 14.6% of HR professionals actually are turning over. So we know HR folks are job searching at this point in time. So with that being said, when you are job searching, which I hope you're not, right? But when you are, you're really looking for that perfect role, that role that is right for you, for the position itself. You're looking to work for a leader that is going to really lead you the way you want to be led. You're typically looking to be a part of a team where you can turn up your strengths and where you can really support others on the team in turning up their strengths because they're complementary of each other, right? So we're not both fighting for the same thing because we both have the same strengths. And then, of course, organizational culture has a significant impact. So when you're looking to identify candidates for a role, those are the four things that you're really looking at. And one of the things that I think is really interesting here as we identify candidates inside of our own organization, and I just want to pause here for a second to say sometimes it's easier to look at what we look at when we're looking outward, like us looking for a role, and then say, okay, now I can take that and put that into the organization, meaning what is that experience that we want to have? So when we are identifying candidates for a role, one of the things that's really important that we so often miss is what are the values of an employee as aligned to the values of the organization. And we've talked about this a little bit. However, there was a LinkedIn news article, and this was LinkedIn Market Research that was surveying 25,468 professionals between December 3rd, 2022 and March 10th, 2023. So very recent. And essentially what this survey stated is that 82% of working professionals want to work at a company with values that align with their own. You know how important that is? That individuals want to work at an organization where their personal values align with the organizational values. So when we sit here and talk about how we identify candidates for a position, it's really important to pay attention to culture and to really talk about, your organizational cultural values in your job ads and when you're identifying candidates. So let's talk about a couple organizational values for a minute. So for example, here at Elevated Talent Consulting, we have a couple values. One of them is being an example of what is possible. One of them is being our word. One of them is, being fun in our work. It doesn't always have to be so serious, right? So we're going to weave that into our job ad, but we're also going to ensure that that is aligned with the values of the individual coming into our organization. The other thing that's really important here when we're looking at identifying candidates is that we talk about the size of the organization. If we are remote, or if we're in person, or if there's hybrid, because each of us have different behavioral needs. And those needs create drives, right? And with that becomes really important to, will this person do the job over a long period of time? So as we identify candidates for our organization as a whole, we're looking at those organizational values as aligned to the individual values. As we look at candidates for a specific role, now we're going even deeper. and we're saying, hey, the job needs, somebody that is incredibly detail oriented, they're process oriented, and they are going to be able to work through a team and not necessarily lead a team. Okay. So if that's what that job specifically needs, then in our job ad, we definitely want to be able to highlight specifically what that is and how that shows up. And so an example of this may be in our job ad when we're identifying and attracting candidates to us, is that we say something to the effect of, do you like working in a work environment that is steady? It doesn't necessarily change, and you're getting a lot of encouragement from the team around you. Do you like to work harmoniously and through the team in a very relaxed work environment? Do you like to, be respected and seek directions from others if delegation's required, right? So these are examples of how we can specifically name things in a job ad so that the person reading that job ad goes, oh my goodness, this sounds exactly like me. I'm very interested in this role. And so those are some of those key ways that we are going to set up our structure in hiring to ensure that we are attracting to the right person to the role. Now, here's something interesting is I get asked so often from our clients and from folks when we're doing our training events that is essentially, hey, so we get all these applicants in. How do we know if, they're actually going to stay with us over a long period of time? And there's really three key areas that we look at, aside from the culture piece, which we talked about at the top of this podcast today. But those three areas that we really look at is looking at the role itself and saying, hey, this role needs an individual that's detail oriented and that's process focused, et cetera. And matching that to, is this person detail oriented and process focused? Do they work through the team? Guess what? Data is our friend, and we have people data that can really help us to do our work so much easier, save us so much time, so much money, so much resources. The tool that we use is called the predictive index. And so we use the predictive index both from the behavioral assessment standpoint and the cognitive assessment standpoint that is then matched to the job that we've done a job assessment on. So when we're looking at these items, we're saying, hey, what does the job need? And who is this person? And what does that person need? Are they a match for each other? And if those things aren't aligned, yeah, there's absolutely times where we can, be self-aware enough to say, yep, I need to shift into this role for this period of time. Yet when we're hiring, we want to hire folks that want to be in that role for a long period of time, which is why we're very specifically looking at our job assessments. And we have a podcast, I think it's 120, where we talk about job assessments that really take a look at this. And that helps us determine, hey, what does this role need so that we can identify those key candidates. So if we take a step back here and say, okay, when we identify candidates, how are we going to do it? One, we want to know who they are behaviorally and are they a behavioral match for the job that's needed? Same with cognitive. Does this role need somebody that's really thinking through very quickly and problem solving at a very high level? Guess what? Then we're going to need somebody that has a higher cognitive level within that specific role. The key here is every role has a different need and every person has a different need. And we need to identify those two things and play matchmaker, right? So the next thing that we want to identify in the candidate is the cultural fit. Are their personal values aligned with the organizational values? And then, of course, the piece that we've been doing, it seems like forever, which is the skill set match. Saying, hey, this role needs education, experience, the ability to do X, Y, Z, right? those things then get aligned as well. So when we're identifying candidates for the role inside of an organization, we definitely want to look at all three areas. And if you've listened to our podcast a bit, you know that we talk about the head, the heart, and the briefcase, which is the behavioral and cognitive traits, the cultural piece, and then the skill set piece for the position. So those are some of those key things that we look at as we match a person specifically to a role. And so here's the other thing to look at when we are matching those items together is we want to make sure for whoever is doing the interviews. So this means, hey, our process, which we talked about the interview process and setting up for this process last week, which is we're going to do our job assessment. We're going to create our job ad. We are going to then send our job ad out. We're going to work with our current employees that may, have some great referrals for us, right? So that's how we're going to set this process up. And then we, of course, need to identify who those candidates are. So we're going to identify candidates based on what we create in our job assessment and how we talk about it out in the community. And when we're identifying candidates, sometimes we're identifying, not sometimes, most of the time, we're identifying where do these candidates hang out? Where are they at, right? So this could be that we're targeting colleges and universities. This could be that we are determining what jobs actually have transferable skills into our current organization, right? So I had worked with a HR manager who was brilliant. And one of the things that he did, he worked in manufacturing. And as we were sitting down and having a conversation about, hey, where are we sourcing candidates from? What does it look like? Ensuring that we're being ethical with our sourcing. We're not stealing from our friends, right? But one of the things that he had mentioned that I took away with me, and this was probably 10 years ago that we had this conversation, and I still see it every single day, is how others treat people has such a huge impact. So again, this was an individual that was hiring inside of a manufacturing environment. And where he found most of his candidates was from the service sector, right? Whether it was restaurants, whether it was a retail store, et cetera. So the key traits that he was looking for in his team members were employees that had great teamwork. They were great at problem solving. They were amazing at keeping an area clean and tidy. And guess what? He knew that he paid more and had better benefits than a lot of the hospitality organizations in his area. So whenever he was out and about with his family, whatnot, he would pay close attention to those individuals that were working where he was going. So for example, if he saw an individual that, kept their area incredibly tidy, had, great communication skills, worked really well with the team around them, guess what? He may say, hey, if you're ever looking for another position, here's my card, give me a call. He identified the candidates that had the traits that he was looking for in his role. So I just give you that example to say it's one of those things to always be thinking about. What are these traits that we're specifically looking for? And if you go back to the podcast last week, we talked about how we come up with interview questions to identify those traits. So take that podcast with this one together to go, okay, so we've identified the traits. Now we're identifying the actual candidate through the job ad that we write, through eyeballs, right? And through our team. And those are some key ways to do this. Of course, if your organization is large enough, you have recruiters that are very, very skilled at identifying those traits on things like LinkedIn, doing some of those outreach, et cetera, and looking at other social media. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But for the small organizations, which we know are many of our listeners, identifying first and then putting it out there in your job ad and then following up, with eyeballs on exactly what those key traits are will be key for you bringing individuals into your organization and truly identifying the key traits that you are looking for. So as we close every episode here, we have an actionable takeaway for executives listening in. And that really goes back to creating the space for your team to build out the core roles and identify both the behavioral traits of each position. You have the opportunity to use Predictive Index, or if you want to try it, we'll have that link in the show notes for you. But it's such a powerful tool that really is an easy button for you to get the right people into the right role, to lead them the way that they need to be led, and to really identify exactly what those behavioral traits are so that you know exactly who to go look for. So again, that key takeaway for executives is to create the space for your team to build out those roles and identify those traits so that you specifically have them. And to add that on, look at what your referral bonus program is for your employees. Are you incentivizing your employees to bring in great employees to work with you? That's a great way to do it. And then our key takeaway for our human resources listening in is create a process of how you identify who those great candidates are, and ensure that that is very much aligned with what your social media is, what your posting is, how you're talking about it with your specific team, so that everybody knows this is what's important to us here. The other thing that that's going to do, side bonus, is it's going to raise the bar on expectations of current staff. So with that, of course, we do have a course that is very specific on this topic if you're looking for a standalone kind of bits and pieces of how to do this. And if you're interested in learning our entire process, which is a bit of the series that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, and we'll continue to talk about for the next couple of weeks, our Hire program is launching on July 11th. And we would love to have you join us within the Hire program, where you will be learning each step of really how to set up your human resources department from the ground up, from identifying your employee value proposition for your organization, how your mission, vision, values align to that employee value proposition and to every single role. Again, we talked about it today at the top when we talked about, look, employees want to work for an organization that aligns with their personal values. That's the mission, vision, values piece. Our Hire program goes into creating a job ad, creating a job assessment, creating a job description, creating salary grids, talking about how you build in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and goes into the recruitment resources that you need, bringing folks in from an offer letter perspective, orientation, onboarding, so that they have a great candidate experience into an employee experience. So I hope to see you inside of our Hire program, which again starts on July 11th. So with that, I hope that you have a fantastic week, and we will see you next week and inside of our program. Have a great one.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.